the recording. And here we are. This is the meeting of February 15th. The entire board is present. Thank you guys very much. And oh, one thing I didn't bring down was the actual agenda of the meeting. So I'm going to find that. I have all my other stuff, but I didn't bring that. So the first thing on it always is accept the minutes of last meeting. Mm-hmm. Everybody cool with those minutes?
I will abstain since I wasn't at the meeting.
That's okay. You don't have to abstain. You can vote for them as a, what's the word I want? A vote of confidence in my minutes, but that I don't care either way.
Okay.
Well, I move to accept them.
Second.
All in favor?
Wim, yes.
Arlene, yes.
Noreen, yes.
Garrett, yes. Strong vote of confidence for you, Catherine.
Thank you, Garrett. Oh, here it is. Ooh. Oh, I see. And obviously me, because I wrote them. So the minutes are accepted. So tomorrow, this is just informational for you guys. Tomorrow there is a DPH webinar that has to do with the state's funding application for CDC emergency preparedness. I guess there's a new round of grants, and Noreen's going to try to attend this. Noreen, do you want to say anything about it?
Well, I'm sure Garrett knows more than I do, but it's the tip. This happens every year at this time. And all of the local areas of the state that get grants, get FEP grants for emergency preparedness planning, have to affirm that they in fact agree with this plan and are applying for funds.
And will this be, would these funds go to MAFCO, to
the application is from FERCOG, but it's administered through the board of MAFCO for Franklin County primarily, and the town of Goshen, or the town of Williamsburg.
Oh, I see. I thought there was another town that was out of county.
There was Goshen, but they've now gone with the Hampshire group who deals with the emergency preparedness planning.
Goshen just seems to be like not close to anything, doesn't it?
Yes.
I'm sorry. So the application is from FERCOG, but can you say that again? It's administered how?
Well, FERCOG applies for the funding for all of the Franklin County towns, including Williamsburg, each year. And the amount that we get, I should know this off the top of my head, but the amount that we get in our area is a little over $100,000. And we use that money typically to hire an emergency preparedness planner and to respond to all the goals and objectives set out by the federal government and also with the state. And this is the state asking all of these entities that usually apply for this grant to, affirm that, the money is going to be spent, it's going to be spent appropriately, and what the work plan is for the year. But, and Garrett, I'm sure Garrett knows more than I do about how this works.
Can I just get a clarification? When you said we typically get 100K, you're saying FERCOG, not Shutesbury.
Correct, FERCOG. Okay. And when I say we, I am co-chair with Carolyn Shores Ness of the Mohawk Area Public Health Coalition.
Okay.
And
FERCOG, so that's what MAFCO is. That's, go ahead.
FERCOG actually gets more than the $100,000 because it's all for all of Region 1. So it's Franklin, Hampshire, Hamden.
Okay.
And yeah, so basically this this presentation by DPH is to explain what they're thinking about in terms of the funding that's going to go out to the various regions. And my understanding is that they're maybe looking at a slightly different funding structure that potentially could benefit Region 1. So Western Massachusetts a little bit more than it normally does, because the current funding structures tend to benefit Boston and Metro Boston because of population size.
And help me here, Garrett, but I only saw a little blurb in the FERCog newsletter about this. It sounds like FERCog has gotten a little extra money, like an additional grant that's going to run for 18 months to kind of study the best way to reorganize emergency preparedness planning for the region. Although we haven't had a meeting in months, so I'm not exactly sure.
I may be
Unfortunately, what's happening.
I may be a little out of the loop with it.
Okay. Okay. Thank
And
you.
the details on the webinar tomorrow, is there I may have gotten it in one of my many emails
I can send it to you.
Okay, I may or may not be able to jump in on that.
So Noreen, you said we use the money to hire an emergency planner. Presumably we have an emergency planner and this is just sort of paying that person's salary for another year. Is that how that works?
It's salary, it's exercises, it's there's actually a work plan that's submitted every year.
But I mean, we already have a planner, right?
No, unfortunately, we haven't had a planner on staff for over a year. And I wish I could be more optimistic in what I'm saying about it. Typically, we meet every other month with MAFCO. We haven't recently since Tracy Rogers left and the planner left. So I don't really know what's going on, unfortunately, even though I'm the co-chair of the group, because we have not met. So I'm reporting from the best of my knowledge of what has happened in previous years. And Garrett is pretty much confirming his understanding of how this normally works.
It sounds pretty problematic about the planner if we don't have somebody to sort of implement the grant.
Absolutely. Yes. So
Is
Carolyn,
there
go ahead.
I just wanted to know if there was an ongoing search.
No, there has been no search. There seems to have been no intention that I can see or Carolyn Ness can see on the part of FERCog to fill the position.
So then the feds could withhold the funding.
Yes, and the state and the feds could, yes. And that might potentially be a step that we need to recommend. But, I'm not sure we've been doing the job that we've been asked to do or paid to do. I might hate to make that kind of public statement, but that may in fact be the case.
That is very disquieting.
But I will, I'll go to this meeting tomorrow and see what at least the state is saying about, what should be happening.
So last year, there was a grant that we presumably received, but we didn't have an emergency planner. So how was the money spent? Was it spent?
What FERCog is saying now is that the new person who took Tracy Rogers' place, whose name is, I haven't even interfaced with him his name comes quickly to mind. That's how bad it is. His last name is Sylvan. And Xander Sylvan, and he has two other people who are supposedly working on the grant, but I can't say that they have. We have not had a meeting. I don't know what's going on today I haven't been impressed with what I have seen. I think the last meeting was in September or October. You know, it was quite a while ago. And I think what FERCog's story would be is that they're covering it using other people that covering the job using other people that they have on staff, and that they're working with the state to kind of redefine how what MAFCO should be called, possibly merging us with the REPC, none of which the board of MAFCO has agreed to or has really been updated on in recent months.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I'm starting to get a picture of what's going on here that I don't think we want to talk about it out loud.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, okay. Okay, thanks, Maureen.
You're welcome.
So another thing that we have received notice of is that on February 21st, which I'm not sure when that is, must be next Tuesday, from 9:30 to 3:30, there is going to be a health equity training, and it has to do primarily with the aging population. And this meeting is in person. It's at the Ulver Center in Greenfield. There's no charge for it. They're serving breakfast and lunch. And if anybody is interested in attending, it's live, as I said. I'll send you the information.
Pat, I saw your email about this and saw that there was a need to name a delegate and an alternate.
Right, but we haven't actually come to that one yet.
We haven't,
Next,
what?
the next agenda item.
Oh,
Right.
excuse me. I'm sorry. Okay.
Right, I wasn't quite there, but
Got it.
hold that thought.
Okay.
I wonder if you'd be interested in going to that health equity thing.
Are you addressing that question to me?
Yes.
Yes, I would be.
Okay, I'll send that to you also. Let me make a note to send you that stuff after the meeting.
Okay.
Okay, now on to that next thing. So the district has been changed into something else, but it's still, right, old wine in new bottles, right? And so we have to, according to the bylaws, we have to elect a representative and an alternate in case the representative can't show up. We now call this thing the oversight board, but we don't really have a name that it's the oversight board of, if you know what I mean.
And when you say the district, are you referring to the Eastern Franklin Health District?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
And so what we need to do is vote for a representative and an alternate. And I have never not gone to one of these meetings. I don't see any reason why I wouldn't. So whoever the alternate is going to be is probably not going to be called upon to alternate. Now, Noreen is already really overcommitted for us, and she has graciously agreed to run again for the Board of Health. I don't want to ask her for anything else. Is there somebody who would be willing?
When are these meetings? How often do they occur? Where are they?
They are in the Irving town offices. They are, right now we've been meeting like once a month or so, but they're meant to be basically quarterly. They meet in the middle of the day, usually. They've usually been on a Wednesday or a Thursday at 2:00. So I realize that would be really difficult. They are in person, the meetings are in person, but I noticed the last time we had a meeting that they had the equipment, the meeting owl and all that stuff and the big screen to make them hybrid. So they could conceivably make a meeting hybrid if not everybody could come.
Well, I would volunteer to be the alternate if Garrett does not want to. I mean, it seems like that
I
makes,
was gonna volunteer to be the alternate if Wim didn't want to.
And I'll volunteer to
Oh
be
my
the
goodness, no.
alternate.
Everybody wants
Ask
to be
My dear
Wim.
Alphonse.
If Wim and Garrett don't want to be it, then I'll be the alternate.
Well, just to complicate matters, I'm going to be asking for an alternate for some of my work as well.
Oh, then
folks.
I'll
So
shut
don't
up.
all step up as ones.
All right.
So if you're looking for alternate to MAFCO, Noreen, I would tend to look to be the alternate for that and would pass to women. Arlene on.
I'll just say it's not MAFCO, it's for the new Valley Health Coalition that I need
And
an
that's
alternate.
the public health
The
excellence.
public health, correct.
Yeah, so I'll be your alternate to that and look to women, Arlene, for the other.
deal.
Okay, which one of you is going to put yourself forward as the alternate for the district?
I don't
I-
have a day job, so,
Yeah, if it's 2 p.m., then it doesn't really interfere with my work day on Thursday. So that's not a problem.
okay.
Okay, so here we have a slate of people for. I'm nominating myself for the representative since I've been that all this time, and I'm nominating Wim for the alternate.
All right. And I have no
so we-
idea what that means, but you'll let me know.
Right, I will, and probably you'll never have to know.
That's my kind of alternate.
Well,
Right.
Kat, can I just say something though? I think it behooves all of us on the board and any future board to learn to have someone who knows what these boards are
Everybody else is doing,
And-
yeah.
Yes, and how they interface with one another, because there
Sure.
have been some critical times this year where that knowledge has been really helpful.
Sure. And for the sake of continuity, yes.
Yes, yeah.
That's a really good point. Really good point, Noreen. So Wim, are you? What is your workday?
So I work 10 hours on Tuesdays and 5 on Thursdays.
I see, and that's in the morning on Thursday, or
Yes,
sometimes the meetings are on Wednesday. Are you free on Wednesday?
that's fine.
Okay, it's usually on Wednesday. We happen to be having one tomorrow.
So
We can, yeah.
yeah, tomorrow I cannot do.
Okay.
On short notice, I have some appointments.
Okay, no problem. At some point, it would be good if you could come
Yeah,
to a meeting and just meet the people and whatnot.
yeah. Let me know when the next one is, and I'll do that.
Sure.
Yeah, tomorrow's impossible.
Okay, so should we vote on ourselves here?
Yes,
I'll second it.
Okay, all in favor?
Arlene,
Wim,
yes.
yes.
Kat, yes.
Noreen, yes.
Okay, and while we're at it, why don't we nominate Garrett to be Noreen's backup or alternate on the PHE?
I think we need to nominate me too. I don't know that I was ever officially appointed. I think I've just been attending, and I think.
Oh,
you
okay.
do both too. I don't think so. I don't.
Okay, well,
think we've
here we have another slate of representatives, Noreen as the primary representative and Garrett as her alternate for the Valley Health Coalition. Is that the right way to say it?
Yes.
Okay, so I move that we nominate them.
Second,
Right? All in favor? Kat, yes?
Arlene, yes.
Wim, yes.
Garrett, yes.
Noreen, yes.
Okay. Okay, great. Thank you, guys. All right. Mary Lou, what's your question?
Hi, Mary Lou Kaka. You spoke earlier about an equity health conference, and I'm curious to learn if that's open for the public or is that Board of Health member people only?
It is open to Board of Health people and Council on Aging people. Can I send you an email? Would you get that? Of course you would. You've gotten emails.
Yes, please. Thank
I
you.
will send you the email and you can see, because I don't know the details off the top of.
Thank you.
And if you'll put your hand down, click your hand off, so I won't take the person, that'll be good.
I got to figure that one out. Hold on.
Okay, well, take your time. All right, we have a couple of disposal works construction projects. One of them is at 70 Cooleyville Road. And this one got completely redesigned because the Conservation Commission rejected the first one. They didn't do the proper wetlands setbacks. Claudia, because Claudia is doing it now, Claudia recommends that we approve it. And the final approval for this, we'll just have to wait for Concom. They have an RDA to consider on March 9th. So we have Claudia's recommendation, we have the fees, we have the application. Will we issue this permit? Is there any objection to issuing this permit?
No.
Hearing none, I will go ahead and issue the permit with a condition that it can't be started, the work can't be started until Concom has ruled. The other one that we have is more complicated. It's 31 Merrill Drive. It's over by the lake. I don't know if that's the place that was all boarded up for years. This one includes a variance. The well setback is being reduced from 100 feet to 70 feet due to the slope and the available space on the lot, which is tiny. So Claudia is recommending approval, and this is a little bit different from anything we've seen before. She recommends that we approve it, but she wants us to stipulate that it can only be installed after a baseline water test is performed, and she wants us to recommend annual well testing for bacteria and nitrate, for coliform and nitrate. So we can make the original test a condition, but after that we can only give a strong recommendation.
Okay, can you just clarify, if you will, why we can require one and not the other? Can you just refresh our memories on why that's the case?
Basically because we don't have any teeth. You know, I mean, if we, we can, hang on a sec, there we go. We can have a requirement and we can hold up a certificate of compliance unless the requirement is met. After that, we really have any way of enforcing it.
Okay, but it seems to me it would be in the best interest of the persons who own or operate 31 Merrill to make certain that their water is tested on a regular basis.
I couldn't
for
agree
the next
with you
5
more.
years. Yeah, so.
Sure. For sure, and so we'll certainly make that point to them.
Right.
Can you just explain to me, because I'm unfamiliar with this. So with this application for a variance on the setback for the well, that entails new well drilling, correct?
No, because this is a repair. So they have a well on site, and they can't make the full distance.
Got it.
So we're being asked for a variance to lower the requirement from 100 feet to 70 feet.
I understand now. So that's how they can test the water. Right.
Right.
And that
Right.
unfortunately, Wim, is kind of the norm around the lake rather than the exception,
Mhm.
just because of the size of the lots.
'Cause
The
they're
lots are
tiny.
very small, yes.
It's true. There are many wells around the lake that don't have the full distance. Many. And the amazing thing is that there has been no contamination of wells by septic systems.
I wonder what the average depth of the wells is. Probably way below the lake level.
Drilled wells, yeah. But there are also a lot of shallow wells and well points still.
Wow.
We don't recommend it, and whenever it comes up, we urge people to drill
Right.
basically, as you say, below the level. But we don't have well contamination. We don't have lake water contamination. Amazing, but true.
Yeah.
So so shall I issue this permit with these recommendations and requirements? Any objections to my doing so?
No.
No.
Hearing none? All right. All right. It's 7:28. Noreen, please go on.
Kat, may I just ask that once we finish with our next item, I would like to update the board on the Public Health Excellence Grant.
Why don't
And,
you do that now?
okay. A couple of things. The Public Health Excellence Grant has been, well, we received some information from Greenfield, who's been in the process of hiring public health nurses to work with the 6 towns that are in the Public Health Excellence Grants. And for those of you who are just listening in on the board today, I'll just give you an update. Those towns are Greenfield, Deerfield, Montague, Leverett, Shutesbury, and Sunderland. And what we've done is there's some additional money coming from the state for us to be able to, for the first time ever in the state of Massachusetts, really share some public health services among towns, including public health nursing and health agents. And we're hoping down the road, perhaps epidemiology and some other services that would be very helpful to us. So given that, Greenfield, who is the lead agency for this granting process, has taken some of the nurses that they have hired and are working for them already and are beginning to sign them to towns to work on Maven. And so I wanted to ask Arlene, who has been doing Maven for us for many years and throughout COVID, and has a lot of personal contacts with people in town and has done a marvelous job, how she feels about that, and if she is okay if the coalition assigns a public health nurse to serve in that role on our behalf, on the town's behalf. And I wanted to, also consult with the board and make sure that they understood that that was one of the things that may be taking place. And this public health nurse wouldn't only be monitoring Maven, but would be available for other services such as education, such as consulting with elders in our community, such as monitoring blood pressures and diabetes and all kinds of things. So it's a much broader public health nursing role that we would be receiving than we're able to do with really our volunteer time on the board. But I really wanted to hear from you, Arlene, and see how you feel about this.
Oh, I feel absolutely fine about it. I have no attachment to continuing with Maven, but I would also welcome them to know that I'm happy to jump in where needed on the Maven and just to continue if there are other charges in the community preclude them doing, if it's needed. I'm happy to go back to doing Maven.
Great, I will, I'll convey that message. And I think they've asked for some information as to how Maven is accessed I can forward that email to you, Arlene. I think you may have seen it already, but I can forward it to you again.
Huh, I don't think I saw it, but please,
Okay.
please send it along and I'll take a look at it.
Will do. Okay, I'll try and move this along a little bit faster because I know we have guests waiting. The other thing that's going on with the Public Health Excellence Grant, otherwise known as the Valley Health Coalition, is that we have looked at sharing software among the towns for conducting inspections for septic, food, housing, for example. And we're very excited about the opportunity we have to do that in a cost-efficient kind of way and have data collected in a consistent way. And the other thing I want to just update the board on is that there is municipal money coming in from opioid settlement funds. And every town is going to be getting a basic amount of dollars. Ours in Shutesbury is about $5,000. The state formula is based on really how many prescriptions people are using in a town. And those settlement funds are starting this year to come into each town. And the coalition is thinking that if some towns like Shutesbury only get $5,000, we're not sure how effective the services are that we could purchase with that amount of money. So maybe it makes more sense to pool the money among the 6 towns, which would total almost, excuse me, $90,000 in this upcoming fiscal year, and be able to perhaps hire a staff person or some other consultation services, excuse me again, that would be much more effective to use. So, sorry, we're thinking of writing a letter because these funds are coming to select boards in the town and proposing that we pool that money to use it in a more cost-effective, more targeted way to really provide some measurable health outcomes to persons who are suffering from addiction problems in the area.
Maybe that would be appropriately through the opioid task force. I don't know.
There are a lot of restrictions on how this money is used and sent out, Wim, and we're just beginning to learn how. Like, for example, the money isn't available for police to use, although obviously they need to be involved in planning for the programming and what services are needed, but the money cannot directly go to policing services. So there are lots of restrictions, and I think because of how it was settled with the companies, we're just learning, all the sort of the rules about this money and how it's going to work. All right, that's all. Thank you.
Thanks, Noreen.
Well, that certainly sounds intelligent, Noreen, to pool the money and use it in some reasonable, I'd be for that. All right. So let's move on to the future presentation. What I would like to do, what I'm planning to do is give a little background on this and explain where we are and what we might do here. And I've made Garrett the co-host here, and I would like Garrett to be the chair from this point on, so that I don't have to chair myself. And I'm going to do some talking, and then I am going to make a motion that will be then on the table for the board to discuss and possibly amend, and I hope vote on tonight, one way or another. I want to make it clear to all of our guests, who are most welcome, that this is not a public hearing. right? You have been informed of this meeting as a courtesy. We will make a little time for you to ask questions or make a comment. But we're not anticipating or desiring a big back and forth. The purpose of this meeting is for the board to deliberate.
And
And
Catherine, could you
Yes.
explain why we don't have to do this as a public hearing? I think that my understanding was that from legal counsel is that it didn't have to be a public hearing. That's correct.
that is correct. What's going on here, I think what you're thinking of is, should we, and I should say when we adopt a Board of Health regulation on green burials throughout the town, because it's a Board of Health regulation that does not have to do with septic systems, we are not required to have a public hearing. Now, I think that we should have a public hearing when the time comes for us to adopt a regulation, but that's not what we're doing here. We are trying to make a ruling on a very specific issue. Okay, so friends who are here, please hold your questions and comments until we establish a public comment period, which will be either somewhere around the time we make the motion. So a little background here, the Jewish cemetery was permitted in 1979. It began the natural burial practices in about 2018, which is kind of interesting because in 2017, the Board of Health was actively doing research and working with the Cemetery Commission to develop green burial standards for use in the West Cemetery. However, we were not informed at that time that the Jewish cemetery also wanted to do green burial. So they have been just not on our radar screen until sometime last year when some of brothers expressed concern about this. So what we have done so far is, first of all, we asserted our authority. The Board of Health does have authority to regulate pretty much anything that would affect a water supply, right, if necessary. So to begin with, we have required a survey of the cemetery's property lines and also of the distance to neighboring wells, residential wells on the two adjoining sides, east and west, and the three wells across the street at those residences, because those wells are in their front yards and not in their backyards, as we learned when the state wanted to widen that road. So there are no regulations. The state does not have regulations governing green burial, although it does have burial regulations, which obviously were in place when the cemetery was established way back in about 1979. In between the time when we worked with the Cemetery Commission on green burial at West Cemetery and today, the DEP has issued some guidelines to assist boards of health that want to adopt green burial regulations. And these guidelines include recommendations on setbacks from various features, including wells and sources of open water and other aspects of the permitting. Since we were familiar with the problems of the issues here, we were rather surprised that the DEP guidelines were extraordinarily and some thought unnecessarily stringent compared to the guidelines that we had adopted for the town cemetery. In this case, to adopt the DEP guidelines would essentially make green burial impossible at the Jewish cemetery. It is true that the Board of Health has not only the authority, but the responsibility to protect the public health, right? And specifically in this case, to protect the drinking water supply. At the same time, it does not behoove the Board of Health to use that authority to constrain the use of a property by its owner unless there is a demonstrable threat to the public health. So we find ourselves between basically two property owners, right, adjoining, right, who have two different objectives, and we're trying to thread the needle between them in such a way as not to be unfair to anyone and not to threaten the public health. So the question is that we need to answer is the public health demonstrably endangered by the failure to adopt the recommended setbacks? So we've been looking into this question, and we have found that there's not a lot of information out there. I want to share my screen after first finding what I want to show you. Here we go. Can you see it?
Yes.
Awesome. I can't quite make it move down. Oh, yes, I can. Yes, I can. Yes, I can. Okay, and I'll go ahead and read this to you. Considering the long-standing practice, I should tell you what I'm reading from. This is from a white paper, one of the very few things that's out there that gives basically the results of a literature study. It's not the literature study itself, but it gives the results of a literature study, and it's about the environmental impacts of green burial. It was written by I believe an engineer named Kevin Kaepernick from the Baltimore County Department of Environmental Protection and Sustainability. And since it's one of the few things out there, this white paper has been very widely circulated by public health groups. So Kaepernick writes in his white paper, considering the longstanding practice of burying human and animal remains, it is surprising to the author that there is relatively little scientific study or regulations regarding the potential human health or environmental impacts from cemeteries. That being said, the lack of study and regulation on the topic does correspond with the lack of known cases where the operation of a cemetery, green or otherwise, has resulted in significant groundwater or surface water contamination. That is, the author found no documented disease outbreaks from water supplies contaminated by cemeteries or mass burial of bodies. So perhaps the perceived problem may not be of great concern, especially if certain precautions are followed. And he cites a World Health Organization result, which concluded that the pollution potential from a properly sited, well-managed cemetery is slight. So we have that expert opinion that we don't have a huge concern here. Kaepernick also points out that some of the studies that are out there that have resulted in very stringent setbacks have resulted from studies of the burial of farm animals, which have 5 to 10 times the mass of a human person. And they tend to presuppose a burial density of 800 to 1,000 burials per acre, which is just staggering to me, the thought that they could get that many in. But there it is. Now, in this case, as you all know, there is a public water supply well that serves the school. And it is well out of the range. The whole zone 1 around that public water supply is well out of the range of the cemetery, and will remain out of range as long as, Garrett, correct me if I'm wrong on this, as long as the burial density of green burials in the cemetery remains fewer than 50 per acre. And JCA has, I should say Sam has agreed to this. So we're talking about a burial density that's about 5 or 6% of what would be seen in some of these studies that have led to these restrictive setbacks. Another reason that these DEP recommendations seem excessive to us is that they are disproportionate to other setbacks used by DEP. For example, the setback between a leaching field and a well, we were talking about this earlier in the meeting, is normally 100 feet. It can be, under certain circumstances, if there's septic system failure and not enough room, it can be reduced to as little as 50 feet. The setback from a private well to an entire landfill is 500 feet. So when we were thinking about this in 2017, our reasoning was that what we know of, come back here, of septic systems could inform our understanding of what kind of setbacks we need in a case like this. So he quotes, here's Kate Benick again, quoting from his white paper, of course, this is in Maryland. Given the decades of experience that the state has had with regulating the discharge of domestic wastewater, the author is inclined to consider many of the standards and setbacks found in the Code of Maryland Regulation for on-site sewage disposal system, which are intended to protect against many of the same constituents as a decomposing body. And he goes on to point out that the soil zone can provide a very efficient medium that can remove or attenuate human health and environmental threats posed by pollutants in wastewater. And this is why we require some kind of soil analysis on the site. And I want to call your attention to his final sentence here. While it is acknowledged that the decomposition of the human body may likely result in higher concentration of contaminants than typical wastewater at the gravesite itself, the density and rate of burial is expected to be relatively low, as we've established here, and the total volume of waste is relatively small. And this points to the fact that the contaminants released into the soil from a burial tend to remain very close to the body. Someone whose knowledge I respect said it's basically within a foot of the body. And of course, that foot is within the sacred and inviolable space of the grave itself. DEP, in it making its recommendations, um, uh, acknowledges that its guidance can be applied to a very wide range of hydrogeological conditions. And this would include the soil type and the depths to groundwater and the slope and the presence of surface water. In this case, the hydrogeological conditions appear to be very good. We have, and well, I'll only show you this if you really need to see it. We have the soil analysis that was done in 1978 or 9 by Elmer Huntley, not just Elmer Huntley Engineering, but Elmer Huntley himself. 8 test pits were dug on the site. They were all 8 feet deep. It was done in March of the year, that is at the moment of highest groundwater. It used to be our perk season, when we had a perk season, because it was the highest groundwater of the year. All of these pits went down 8 feet and none of them hit water. Right? Groundwater is very deep in this area. And this is important because the byproducts of decomposition, and indeed any kind of contaminant in the soil, don't travel far in the absence of moving water. Right? And compare and contrast with a leaching field. You know, when you have your leaching field, you want it to be open to the rain because you want a lot of water moving through the system, right? And carrying the contaminants down into the soil, where the soil microbes effectively filter it before that water gets back, re-enters the groundwater. And that's because with a leach field, it's constantly being filled up again, right, with new contaminants, right? This isn't the case with a burial where the body is placed in the ground one time. It releases its various fluids, some of which are considered to be contaminants, and they remain close to where the body was deposed. What contaminants are we talking about? I have also from Kaepernick, a quote: "The primary pollutants of concern from a cemetery are bacteria, viruses, nitrogen, and to a lesser degree, chlorides, sulfates, phosphates, iron, potassium, and magnesium." Okay, so for the most part, not things of great concern. The bacteria and viruses, obviously, are the worst, and that includes prions from a few human diseases, which are fairly rare. So, because these contaminants can be moved around by water, and because they don't move around, they move around only with great difficulty where there isn't water. The trick is to keep them out of the groundwater and out of the surface water, and therefore out of people's wells. And that's where the soil type and the very, very deep, low groundwater are useful here. So Kaepernick makes recommendations for the state of Maryland, and they're based on different kinds of aquifers. And they range from 50 feet. There's one kind 50 feet, one kind 100 feet, one kind 300 feet. It strikes me that these types of aquifers are pretty much irrelevant to our case because the aquifer is not accessible. right? There is not a good way for any water carrying contaminants from these graves to get into an aquifer or into the groundwater. So I'm going to ask the Board of Health right now, not anybody else. Do you have any comments or questions to this point? Arlene? You're muted.
Did you find anything in the literature, Kat, regarding whether they looked at not just the organic products of decomposition, but also at things like chemotherapeutic agents that might have been used for the deceased person, or even what are sometimes used as small radioactive implants in some cancers, that type of thing?
I ran across somewhere, and I can't give you a citation for this, saying that as far as medications go, they do not survive well in the soil outside the body.
Their half-life is
Yeah. As far as the radioactive things, like those little seeded ones that they use for prostate cancer and so on, I don't know if those are actually removed from the body before burial. I can't imagine that they want to send out a radioactive body. But I don't know that. It could be something that we could in some way require, or at least find out and be informed about.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else from the board? Okay, let me ask you this. I have a motion consisting of several recommendations, and we will deliberate on it, and you may wish to make amendments to it and so on. Should I make that motion first, or should we ask for a public comment first? What's the sense of the board?
I think that perhaps the comments first.
All right, Garrett, do you want to open up the meeting to comments from the public?
So I guess my question would be then, as the board, once the motion's made and after we've had a chance to discuss the motion, do we want additional feedback before we vote?
Maybe we should leave that open.
I have yet another suggestion. Perhaps we open to public comment for a brief period of time, Garrett. If there are any questions about what has been presented, then I would suggest that Kat share with all of us her ideas in terms of a motion, and the board could discuss that first, and then if relevant, we could ask those other persons present if they have comments as well.
I'm supportive of that.
Okay.
So at this time, we will take questions, comments on the information that Catherine has presented, and we'll begin with Walter Tibbetts.
Yes, thank you. Just one quick question. Catherine, you referenced many times the DEP setback regulations, but you did not mention what they were in comparison to everything else.
Right. Okay. Let me get that.
Kat,
And
I have it in front of me if you'd like for me to go ahead and do it.
oh yeah, would you share it?
Yeah, so the difference, so I'm going to talk about the difference between the DEP recommendations and the model research from Baltimore County that Kat talked about. And this is specific to setback requirements for wells. So on the DEP side, their recommendations, the setback recommendations are largely based on burial density. and they are intended to apply to a range of hydrogeological conditions. So if we're talking about a single green burial grave, the setback from a well is, the recommendation is 300 feet. If it's a family plot, it's 300 feet. If it's a density of 50 burials per acre, or if it's a hybrid cemetery, both green and conventional burial, that 50 burials per acre or hybrid scenario is 750 feet. From Baltimore County, through their research, what they recommended as model practice, those setback recommendations do factor density, but do not increase in distance with higher density. The maximum setback is 300 feet. And then from there, they utilize gradient to establish stricter setback requirements. So if the well is in an unconfined aquifer that is up gradient, then it's 100 feet. If it's down gradient, it's 300 feet. And then they have other considerations for setback, you know, an example of that would be a property line setback. They would establish 500 feet, or a stormwater facility 100 feet. But as it relates to wells, those are the differences, Walter.
Okay, thank you.
Diane.
Thank you. This topic is fascinating. It's something I never gave any thought to before this. Right around the time that Sam Gladstone contacted me to get permission to do a survey, I was curious and I went out with a tape measure and found that the distance between our well and the nearest gravestone is 90 feet.
So that's to the lawn cemetery.
To the JCA cemetery.
Yeah, they have it divided into two things. We have the traditional one with all the headstones, and it's in a sort of open lawn. And then they have these natural burials that are basically mounded earth. And those are further to the east from you. So those mounded graves are the ones that we are concerned about. We're not concerned about the already existing graves with the big marble stones, right?
Yeah, this was one that had like a regular gravestone, and it's along the western border of the cemetery, because that's the side that I'm on.
Right. And that is the well of your rental property, not the
Correct.
house.
It's the well for 226 Leverett Road.
Thank you.
And so, Catherine, those particular burials are conventional, not green. Is that correct?
Why don't perhaps Karen Rhodes wishes to address
Karen
that?
had her hand up next.
Right.
Sure, I can do some clarification, and I also just wanted to ask a question. So the JCA has been since 1970, whatever you said, doing conventional burials in the main part of the original part of the cemetery, which is I think what you're talking about. And then just in the last, more recent time, started this green burial initiative because of the desire of the community to be more environmentally, in theory, the green burial is more environmentally friendly and better for the environment than the traditional burial. And very, very few, I think there's just a handful of people that have been buried in the green burial before this situation came up. So it's highly unlikely that you're seeing those close to your house. My question is, I just wanted to clarify that all the data that you're talking about, which by the way is very thorough, and thank you, that was really helpful to me. But is that all specific to green burial, or that's data about burial in general? Like what?
Most of it is specific to green burial because it's in green burial where the products of decomposition actually are released into into the soil. Now, it's my understanding that that actually is part of Jewish burial practice anyway, that the caskets are
So-
drilled.
Right. So, well, it's the part that for us when this first came up, there's not so much difference between traditional Jewish burial and green burial.
Right.
Traditional burial, my understanding is it's 8 feet down, or at least 6 feet down. And but in Jewish burial, we don't embalm the bodies. They're buried in plain wood caskets that can decompose. And there are cement grave liners, but they have holes in them so that because the requirement is that you be able to become one with the earth, like, or dust to dust, earth to earth, that kind of thing. And the grave liners are there not from a hygiene perspective, but from a structural integrity perspective, because the earth is sandy in that particular area. And the excavating company said, we advise that you put in these things, but there are special ones designed for Jewish burial that that basically don't have bottoms. So it can still go to the earth. The green burial is more like 3 or 4 feet deep. And may not include a casket at all. But again, ours are only simple pine boxes, unfinished pine boxes in the first place.
Dina? You're muted.
Yeah, no, I know. Thank
Yeah.
you. A couple things. One is that, like Karen's saying, Jewish burial is very close to green burial in general. I call Jewish burial what I would call traditional burial, like most of the old burials up in the cemetery in town, where they were very simple burials. And I call what we do with caskets and embalming and vaults conventional burial. And then there's natural and green burial. So I sort of split it into those 3 categories for my own thinking, because it helps me. I want to thank you, Catherine, for such a strong presentation, and I learned things. I really appreciate that. And the other thing I want to say is that it's not true that there is an effluent from conventional burials with all of those embalming fluids. And but so just to keep that in mind, it's in our general overview that we don't have what we don't have in burial science for some reason that I don't understand is, test wells around these giant burial grounds where the water can be tested to see what is really coming out of these cemeteries, and that information really doesn't exist right now.
Right.
That's it for now.
Thank you.
Wait, there's one other thing. I'm sorry. In the green burial sort of conversations that I have, we kind of assumed that the DEP's 300 number came from Billy Campbell's conservation burial work. And which is pretty easy to find online. And there is other information about the specific characteristics of soil and its ability to act as a filter for natural body waste and stuff. And I can certainly send you those things.
Thank you.
Chris and Lisa.
Hi there. Thanks
Hi.
again for taking the time to deliberate this.
Mhm.
And if for anybody we haven't met or seen before here, we live right next to the cemetery, and we were the ones who first noticed it happening because there is, can you hear us? Yeah. Because there is a burial within 100 feet of our well, and that was with a tape measure also. And we had measured that after the body had gone in January of 2022. So that's when we started bringing it to the attention of the Board of Health and the DEP. And so I guess all we wanted to say was that normally, like in all the literature, it is the setbacks from private wells tend to be 300, like Dina was saying, and that person that she was citing has cited that from all of the other literature. And that's the DEP recommendation. And that's also, I think, we're seeing in the Copernic, or however you say that, Copernic, because that's a long document that he had published. And so the 300-foot setback is also in there. So we just wanted that to all be considered. And then that was interesting to hear. We had kind of heard that about the other conventional burials at this cemetery. And it does kind of raise the question for us, like there are all of these regulations and recommendations from DEP, just because it is such a new burial way of burying. I mean, we've been thinking about it for a decade or more, and we are proponents of green burial. But when it comes to safe drinking water, that's where, and our safe drinking water, that's where we got concerned. So I guess my question then would also be, if the other burials that are being done over there are similar to green burial, they're coming up with these recommendations because they don't know, sorry, the cats are, they don't know what potential issues there could arise in the future. So we just want that to be considered.
I want to get a clarification. Thank you, Lisa, and thank you both for bringing this to our attention, because it was appropriate for this to be considered by the Board of Health. There's a question I would like to get clarity on, and that is, Karen, you said the vaults were drilled. It's the vaults, not the caskets. Is that right?
Correct.
But the caskets are wood and biodegradable, even in the conventional part of the cemetery.
Yes. And that's not something we invented. That's how Jews have been burying their dead
Right.
for thousands of
Right.
years.
Yes, I get that. But thank you. Thank you for being clear on that. All right.
And when you say vault, my understanding is from how you described the conventional Jewish burial, is that if there is it's more of a retaining wall that is perforated, but there is no concrete base. It is soil. Is that correct?
Correct. So I've never seen one, it's like exactly how they're constructed, but that whether there's holes on the side and holes on the bottom, there's something, it's a structural thing. It's to provide structural integrity so that the grave doesn't collapse in on itself once the body and box decompose. But it must be by Jewish law, it must be that the material, the decomposed material of the body and the coffin can become one with the earth. And so that's how they're designed. So I don't know if it's holes in a solid base or if it's just walls with no base at all. And I think there's some variation from cemetery to cemetery. So I don't know ours specifically. I've never been there when they put it in, but there is some communication between inside and outside.
However, that would be interesting to know, because I imagine there is much less transference of anything within the vault if there is a solid concrete base in that vault. Then if
It's definitely not a solid concrete base. It just might not be nothing. It might be some concrete base versus nothing, but it's definitely not solid.
Well, even if it's perforated, it would impede any interaction between the vault and the soil to a much greater degree than if there were no base, is my belief.
Jackie, did you want to add something? You had your hand up and you're on mute.
Yeah, I was just going to clarify, I've been working with this cemetery, that Billy Clark asked, because he was the excavator in the lawn cemetery, the lawn part that's closest to your property, Diane. He asked for concrete liners. The word vault is a little misleading. So they are liners because this soil is very sandy, because he feared that in digging, when one grave site is next to another, if there's one in place and you go to dig the next one, it could disrupt it or slide. So there are vertical concrete liners that are perforated, separating graves in that original 1979 area that was used as for burial. The area that's closer to Lisa and Chris, the forest area was more recently developed for green burial, which is not so different than the lawn. Doesn't need the liners because it's not sandy. And the aspect of mounding is a different, the body is placed 4 feet versus 6, and it's mounded, and as things decompose, then the ground, levels.
The green burial ones, graves are also spread further apart on purpose as part of the, like you're next to a tree and then there's not another grave until the next tree over, like it's purposefully set up to become natural and look natural.
Yes, but it was designed that way with regard for the trees and not to interfere with the root systems. So, did that answer your question?
I forget who got even, oh, it was Wim. Wim, did that answer?
I am afraid we may never know what a retaining wall versus a vault actually means.
Call Dennis Clark and he can tell you.
I can speak to that.
Please do.
So, and so can Walter. And Walter, I hope you're there and you can correct me if I'm wrong, because you've seen more vaults than I have. The vault has a bottom and 4 sides and a lid that goes on after. Sometimes vaults are what we call butter dished, where they're turned upside down and there's no lid on the bottom. There's no, and the casket or coffin is dropped right onto the ground, and then the butter dish goes on top, and that's really a convention for mowing. So there's less settling. I was at a burial at the JCA cemetery a couple of weeks ago and was very quietly looked inside really carefully. And there were on the sides, not terribly thick pieces of concrete that kept because there were other graves very close that kept the sides from caving in with the sandy soil. And really it's not as so much about settling with these what are they called? I'm sorry, I've got bronchitis and I'm not thinking really straight tonight, but
what are you trying to say, Dina?
What are we calling
Liner. You're
the
thinking
liner? Thank you, Walter. So the liner itself is it's a safety thing for the people handling the grave.
I know, but when you peeked in there a couple weeks ago, what did you see at the bottom?
Dirt.
There's the answer I'm looking for.
I believe I saw dirt. I was looking more at the sides and it was harder to see all the way down because of the casket was already in place. On top, it hadn't been lowered. So you know how they lower it later.
Correct.
There you go.
So Wim, in 2017, when we were working with the Cemetery Commission about green burial in the West Cemetery, that was one of our requirements. That there could be, that a vault wasn't required, or liner, if you prefer, we use the word vault. A liner wasn't required, but if there was one, it had to be open to the earth.
All right, then my question is answered.
There's another way to deal with cave-in risk, which is as you're setting the grave, as you're digging, plywood on the,
Mm.
sitting down plywood on the sides that you can
Oh,
put handles on the top. And so
right.
there are lots of creative ways, especially in green burial, where the burial is 3 to 4 feet and you're not talking 6 to 8 feet. There are ways to deal with the cave-in.
Yeah, my concern is not really cave-in. That is not at all what I'm thinking about. What I'm thinking about is addressing the concern that there are products of decay that could come in contact with the aquifer. And if this new technique for burials is substantively non-differing from the conventional liner technique, because there's no bottom in a lined grave, then it's less concerning for me.
Understood.
You were mentioning, I think, 3 to 4 feet. I don't have in front of me the depth that we recommended or even required for green burials in West Cemetery, but it was quite shallow.
I can
Walter,
give you that, Catherine. I don't have it right in front of me, but by memory, it is no greater than 4 feet.
Okay.
Although there must be at least a minimum distance of 2 feet between the body and historical high water mark, which we're far above that. And there must be at least 2 feet of dirt between the body and the surface. So you've got a
Okay.
range of between 2 and 4 feet
Okay.
for the body to be in.
Okay. So at the Jewish cemetery, they're in that range. Right. Because what our research showed at the time, the reason we brought that up was that there's a sort of an optimal soil depth for decomposition, right? You don't want it to be too shallow, but you also don't want it to be too deep, because
That's correct.
The microbes that do that
Correct.
work in the soil work in that 3 to 4 foot range.
exactly.
And can I just ask another question? Does anybody present know the depth of their well? Any of these abutters?
I don't think so. Diane, do you?
The previous owner of the property told us it was 350 feet deep.
Okay.
I'm not surprised. It's very
I
dry.
have not verified that.
Uh-huh.
Although I would think the Board of Health would have a record from when it was drilled, but
We're
maybe.
supposed to, but those records are really incomplete.
But
Really-
it's not a dug well. It's a drilled well.
It's a drilled well.
Yeah, so then it's.
So then so that it must go down into bedrock. So it would have to be really quite
Definitely.
deep.
definitely.
And Chris and Lisa, do you know
The
where,
water out of it is lovely.
Oh, good.
can I ask a question of Chris and Lisa? Just a curious one.
Please do.
Do you guys know how deep your well is?
We don't. We had called the Board of Health. There's no record. So
Is
it
it,
seems like, yeah, that would be an answer we would want too, in terms of,
Yeah, we can't find the well report. It's not on record with the
It
state.
is a drilled well, though?
is it a drilled or a dug well? Does it have a little pipe coming up, or is it a bigger concrete round top?
no, it's a pipe.
It's a pipe.
Oh, so
That's a
then it's
drilled well.
Okay.
It's a drilled well.
And
Right.
likely to be quite deep there. Buzzy might know if you call him, if he drilled it.
Oh, okay.
He
Is he-
drilled, and especially given when that house was built, it's quite likely that he
He did it.
he did
Okay.
it. Walter might know,
Okay.
because he lived here then.
Yeah, I don't remember who actually drilled that well. I was probably a little bit younger than that then, but most of them were either, Stavens or, another company that drilled them, but Buzzy was involved in installing the wells in most every resident in,
Right.
the Shutesbury,
Uh-huh.
Leverett.
He
Pelham
did ours
area.
in 98, so.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
what town is it? He in? What town is he in?
Oh, Buzzy is Mountain Springs Well and Pump, and he's in Pelham.
Okay, thank you.
He did mine last year. He did I have a 400-foot well. So
So I'm going to recognize Diane, and then I think I'd like to entertain Catherine's motion.
I just wanted to offer something to Chris and Lisa. Very often the well driller will leave the name of their company stuck on a label to the pressure tank, and they have a record of how deep your well is.
Oh,
So
okay.
that way you can find out who your driller was.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Thanks.
It is very frustrating that we don't have good records basically before about the 1990s. The records before that, and there's a particularly bad spot around the 80s, but even before that, we have very little in the way of records. DEP supposedly has these records, but they're almost impossible to find. The drillers are supposed to send a copy of the well completion report to the Board of Health and also to DEP. Part of the problem with the old records is that in Shutesbury, I don't know if it's this way everywhere, but in Shutesbury, a property isn't given a house number until everything's done. The well's in, the septic system is installed, and the house is built. So the place doesn't have a house number on the well completion report. It has sometimes a very cryptic description of
Like a treasure map.
approximately where it is. Yeah, exactly. Right now they have GPS, but of course, in the period when we don't have records, it's very frustrating. Some more hands raised.
So I will defer to the board. Do we want to continue with that with additional questions and comments, or do we want to entertain the motion?
Why don't we hear what people have to say?
Okay. So before Karen, you had your hand raised before Dina, so I'll go back to you.
Thanks. I just, for what it's worth, historically, when the JCA was working on its green burial plans, they didn't just come up with it on their own. They worked with the Conway School of Landscape Design to sort of do their due diligence of all the different factors that might need to be taken into consideration. And, those are professionals. I know that it doesn't mean that we took everything possible into consideration, but it wasn't just a committee of volunteer people at the JCA who decided to start doing this. They actually talked to some professionals, and we have a very thorough study and design process that was that we went through before we started this particular type of burial.
Yes, we heard a lot about that from Sam.
And Dina?
I just want to, before you head into deliberations, and especially, sorry, this bronchitis is a little intense, but especially in the context of hearing the conversation about the depth of wells. If a body is up here in the first, about 3 to 4 feet from the surface, and a well is, let's say to be generous, 200 feet below. The decomposition from a body is not anything like what's coming out of your leach field or going into your leach field, right? The decomposition from a body is slight and slow. So the leaching from that body and the effluent from that body into the ground is happening at a slow rate, and it's not a lot of material. That doesn't make it less concerning in any way, but the science of this is important to give thought to, and the sort of realistic aspect of decomposition and what decomposition is. In green burial right now, we are looking for, honestly, we're looking for a body farm where we can study bodies buried at that level and do little test wells around them and find out what's really happening in the soil. around those bodies. And it makes it harder to answer these questions that when we don't really have solid answers for boards of health. And people asking very reasonable questions about the protection of their water supply. So I appreciate the critical nature of this conversation, but also urge you to keep in mind that between where that body is and where the well is being pumped from, there's a lot of earth and a lot of rock, because we're in Shutesbury, and where the effluent from even a number of decomposing bodies is going to go, it may not be that far, is what I'm trying to say.
And Dina, we appreciate that. And I think that you understand that it hasn't been stated explicitly, but I think we all understand that what we are talking about here is not biologic decontamination. It's not bacterial. It's not the same as a septic system. The real unknown is heavy metals and inorganic compounds that do not degrade.
And medicines. Yeah, I agree. And I think this is a really important conversations for towns to be having.
Chris and Lisa.
Hi, yeah, and thank you, everyone again. And thank you, Dina, that made sense. And I just wanted to say that moving forward, if we do decide that this is all okay, I think this will be like the test case probably, because it isn't happening anywhere else this close to private wells or public wells like at the elementary school. So I just wanted to put that out there, that this would be like a test case in the real world if it does go forward. That's
I
all.
might ask you guys one other thing besides, it sounds like you're interested now in verifying the depth of your drilled well, but have you had your water tested?
Yeah, well, it was tested when we first moved in, and we've had it tested recently. We haven't gotten the results yet. So, and then we would plan then on doing it annually to see if there is change in the water.
Great.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, Catherine, I don't see any other hands, so do you want to?
Okay. I would like to move that, let's see, let me get back here. I would like to move that the board adopt the following stipulations for green burial at the Jewish cemetery. And I have several of them. We can take them one by one. Here we go. Okay, first, that a distance of no less than 100 feet shall be maintained between a burial and any drinking water well. If any board member wants to speak to any of these as we go, please do so. And
Kat, I would like to address this one because when you specify a distance, I have to say that it's been frustrating, I think, for the Board of Health that we have not received full compliance from the JCA on a survey of the boundaries.
let me answer that. The reason that we have not seen this survey yet is that they were having trouble getting permissions, because we asked for not only a survey of the boundary, but we asked for a survey showing the location of abutters wells on 5 properties. And there was some foot dragging, I would agree, but they couldn't get all these permissions. That was just a slow process. However, they did go out and immediately engage the services of a surveyor. So, and their intentions are good, but they have not completed what we asked for. I think that further pieces here of my what is this motion might address that to your satisfaction.
Okay.
So Kat, one question I have is, are we talking about any type of burial in this particular motion, or is this specific to a green burial?
This is specific to a green burial. Shall I add that specifically?
I think in this particular case, it would be important to possibly make that distinction.
Okay, all right. So I just typed that in. Okay.
So I guess I would need to move to amend.
Oh, good point. Good point.
We need the second, and then there would have to be discussion of that.
Okay, all right.
So
I'll undo that.
I would move to make clarification about what type of burial we're talking about in this particular. So I would move to amend to specify that we're talking about green burial.
Let's second that.
Discussion from the board?
And you will include a description of what a green burial is, to the best of our understanding.
Remember that we're not writing a regulation here. We're just ruling on a particular case. Perhaps instead of green, we might use the word natural.
Yeah, I prefer natural to green. I know that green is used in a lot of the literature, but natural to me.
Okay.
So I also would just, for my own clarification, this clause goes both ways. So let's say an abutter wanted to dig a new well. They would be constrained if it were not more than 100 feet, right? It's not only burials, it's well drilling as well.
I don't think that's true, Wim, because in the case of the setback between wells and septic systems, you can drill the well pretty much anywhere you want, but you can't put the septic system anywhere you want. That's why we recommend that people put in the septic system first, because if there's problem with siting it, then it might impinge on a well that's already there. So the setback is keeping the source of contamination away from the well, but it doesn't keep the well away from the source of contamination.
All right, good.
Go
Thank
figure.
you. Thank you for
Yeah,
clarifying.
Bill used to say that you could actually drill your well right down the center of your leach field if you really wanted to. It would be legal, just not smart. Okay, so we have a motion that's been seconded to be specific here.
And however we want to do it, natural parentheses green, however you want to do it, Kat, I'm fine with that.
So we just use the word natural?
Yes.
Sure.
Is everybody good with that? Karen Rhodes wants to weigh in on this, and that might be helpful for us.
I was just going to suggest, since internally we use the distinction green burial versus conventional burial, if this is something specific to this situation and not a general rule that you're making, you may want to keep the vocabulary the same as what we use.
I can support that. Yeah.
And that was green, did you say?
Yeah, we use green burial.
Okay. Well, yeah, this is specifically for you, so perhaps we should stick with the word green or natural.
Yeah, we have I worry because we were just talking about how traditional Jewish burial is fairly natural anyways. So I just want to, we have our old part of the cemetery and then the green burial part of the cemetery. And that's our instinct.
How about this? How about so-called green burial?
Sure.
I'm not suggesting that it's not green, but rather that's the language that's being used here.
Or could we
I
do
would-
something like green/natural or green parentheses natural? Something like
I-
that.
As the one who proposed the amendment, I would support, the green parentheses natural.
Okay.
That would cover it.
Okay. So Garrett, do you want to call for a vote on that amendment?
Any other discussion from the board? So the proposed amendment to the language that's before us is to add green parentheses natural burial.
Type it in so we can see it.
And that has been seconded. And then we'll take a vote on that. Arlene?
I'm sorry?
We're going to vote on the.
Yeah, sure.
Yes. So Arlene?
Oh, I'm sorry, you're doing a roll call. I get it. In favor.
Wim?
Yes.
Noreen? You might be
Maureen,
on,
are you with us?
might be on mute, Noreen. Nope, there she is. I'll come back to Noreen. Cat?
Yes.
Garrett, yes. Noreen?
I'm sorry. I had to leave. I had to leave the room for a minute.
So we are voting to add the words green parentheses natural to Kat's original.
Yes.
So that was unanimous. And then Kat, I have one additional question related to this. So this is not for a specific density, correct? Density of green parentheses.
We're gonna address the density later on in the motion.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. Can we go on to the next stipulation?
Okay.
All right. Unless and until the distance to any abutter's well is determined by a professional surveyor, the distance shall be between the burial and the property line.
Oh,
Okay, and so Kat, my question on this one is, when in this particular area where we say the distance, we're referring to the 100 feet. So in other words, above we say 100 feet between green natural burial and any drinking water well. So here, are we saying that the distance between the
Oh.
property line?
Okay, yeah,
and
okay, so
natural
why don't
burial-
you, right, why don't you propose, why don't I propose an amendment? Why the hell not? The 100-foot setback, shall we say it that way?
Yes.
I'll write that as a try, and if we change it, that's fine. 100-foot setback shall be between the burial and the property. I propose that we amend this article that way.
For the purpose of discussion, I'll second it.
Roll call.
Wait a minute, we have discussion.
Oh,
So discussion first from the board.
seems fine to me.
it's fine.
It's fine.
Garrett, you said for the purpose of discussion, you would second it. Do you have another change?
I don't believe so. I just wanted to go back and look at what they said in the model practice, and property line was 50 feet.
Right, but this is
that exceeds, yeah. And
this is substituting the property line for the actual location of the well.
right.
If the actual surveyed location of the well is unknown.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Right. It's not in their interest to not know it, but it's a way, this was a way for us to sort of move forward without having that survey completed.
Right.
yes. If there's no other discussion, so on the previous sentence, we did take comment. Do we want to take comment on this one as well?
We only really took a comment because we were getting some clarification from somebody who knew.
So shall we move to vote?
Can I just ask, do we know if there is any current burial site that is within that boundary, the setback right now?
According to Lisa Kurzel, there is a burial within 100 feet of her well. That has not been verified by any kind of survey or anything else. But that is anecdotal evidence that we have.
All right, so if that were true, what would happen?
We'll get to that later in the motion.
Okay.
I've tried to think of all these things, Wim, but I hope I have.
So on this, so I don't think that we
haven't voted on this.
So did we vote on the amendment to this particular one? So the 100-foot setback?
We did not.
Okay, so there was you moved the amendment and there was a second. So we'll vote on adding the 100-foot setback first. So Arlene?
Yes.
Wim?
Yes.
Maureen?
Yes.
Kat?
Yes.
Garrett, yes.
Okay.
All right, and any further discussion on the amended piece that's before us? Okay, so we'll vote on the amended language here, the second sentence. Arlene?
Yes.
Wait a minute, isn't that what we just did?
I thought
Oh,
so.
you're doing the whole thing.
Now the whole, the
Yes.
amended version.
Well, do we have to vote on each thing, or can we amend it until we like it and then vote on the whole thing at once?
I will.
You're chairing this, so you get to decide, but I'm wondering how that works.
I think it's proper to go through each one.
Did we vote on the first one? We voted on the amendment to the first
On
clause.
the
but-
change of language, yes.
Right, but I don't think we voted on the actual
No,
Oh,
thing
maybe we-
itself.
all right, so we will.
So wait a second, Garrett. If we do that, then we are voting to accept all these, and we're kind of buying a pig in a poke, because I've got about 5 more clauses here.
Okay.
I think it would be better for us to establish all the language we like and then vote on the whole thing.
I'm fine with that. So we can move on to the next one.
Mhm.
Okay, in the case of abutters on the opposite or north side of Leverett Road, the property line shall be defined as the line between the abutter's property and the road right-of-way. The point of this being, we don't want to start that 100-foot setback from the road on the cemetery side. That wouldn't make any sense. Right, we're trying to approximate the distance to the well. So it's the abutter's property line that would be the start of that 100-foot setback.
Okay.
and
So the width of the street would count as part of the 100 feet.
okay, and when you say the road right of way, that's a margin on the south side of Lever Road?
Right,
All right,
right, because we want a surveyed distance between any burial in the cemetery and the well on the other side of the street. If we don't have a location for that well, we would go to their property line and we'd take the 100 feet from there.
got it.
Seems unnecessarily restrictive to have it on the cemetery property line
Correct.
when those property lines are not contiguous, when they're not the same line.
Yeah.
Garrett, are you okay with that? You seem skeptical.
I'm just doing the northeast, west, south thing.
Okay, well, they're on the south side, and those three houses are on the north side.
I'm good.
Okay.
So you have moved that. Do we have a second on that one? Oh, wait. So
Wait.
we're
We
going
didn't
to,
make any change. We haven't made any change here.
I'm sorry.
Okay. Ready for the next one? Okay. Okay, now here, whoops, sorry. Oh, okay. The density of natural, and I think here we better put green parens natural burials shall not exceed 50 per acre. Acreage shall be defined as the woodland burial area and shall not include the existing lawn burial area. Okay, there is maybe a quarter or a third of an acre out of this 2 acre parcel, 2.2 acres, that is already used up with conventional or semi-conventional burials in that lawn area. I don't think that the 50 per acre should be the whole 2.2 acres. It should be the area devoted to green burial, which would be probably like 1.3 acres or something. So this would limit the total number of burials that would be legitimate on the site.
And this is where the survey comes in, correct?
This is part of it. Yeah, they would have to determine how much of an acre the lawn section, the used section, the old section takes up, and how much is left. And that would give them the number of possible burials.
So until that is known, should burials proceed apace? I mean, because we assume we're not gonna get close to that limit.
Well, here's the thing. I asked for information about this, and the historical range of numbers of burials is between 5 and 12. So we're talking about one burial every month or two.
Wow. So it's pretty quick.
Well, I mean, when you think of a big cemetery, they're burying several people a week. We're talking about one every month or every other month.
I meant in relation to the max allowed. It's pretty quick. It could fill up.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. If they have, 85 or 90 or so, it would fill up in several years. But that's not our problem. So
Well, the death rate is not.
let's hear from Karen if we could.
So I just wanted to clarify, we actually treat our cemetery in 3 sections: the old section, and then we have a lawn green and a forest green burial. So the forest green is where people started, but there was also intended to be a lawn green burial. So I just want to be careful about the use of the word lawn section as opposed to the original or old or conventional burial section.
How about, okay, so let's have, I'm going to propose some amendments here. Right. Acreage shall, how about doing it this way? Acreage shall not include the original original conventional burial area.
No.
So I'm gonna write the proposed amendment here, and it will have green acreage shall Oops, that was the wrong thing.
The
Okay, now.
existing lawn, no, that was okay, right?
Oh, wait. The acreage shall not include the original conventional burial area. That's what I propose as an amendment here. I move this amendment.
So let me just remind myself.
Can we get
by-
a second on the amendment before we discuss it?
Second,
Thank you. Karen, do you still have your hand up or is that just a mistake? Thanks.
Sorry.
No problem. Okay.
Now are we discussing?
Yes, go ahead, Lynn.
So we did see at one point a map of burial lots that had been sold already, I believe, and they were numbered. Were any of those outside of the wooded area?
So it's a little tricky. We aren't assigning specific plots as they're sold. The part of the green burial methodology that I'm just coming into this in the last couple of months. There's a list of people who have purchased the plot in the green burial sections, and we have a total number of plots that we can sell, but they're not specifically assigned until the person is ready to be buried, unless a relative has been buried, in which case we are reserving like the next spot over. Because we just went through moving to a new cemetery software, and one of the issues we ran into was that I can't assign a chunk of the list to specific plots because we're not doing it that way.
And can you tell us how many plots, how many people are on this list who have bought plots?
I can look it up for you. If you talk and I'll look it up and I'll be right back.
Okay.
Jackie, while she's doing that, would you go ahead, please?
Yeah, no, I wanted to explain the why they're not assigned, which is that because in the forest area, you don't really know what the roots are doing. So you dig a grave and because they're shallow dug and slow dug, then you're trying to not disturb the roots in and around the trees. And so then the one next to it, you might guess that it could be within, 2 feet or 3 feet, but there might be a big root structure and it really has to be a little further apart.
See, our only concern here is that they may have sold more than we're allowing them to use.
So I have a result. So our spreadsheet shows me that we have about 85 total between the forest green and the lawn green burial sections that have been
Okay.
sold.
Okay, you should probably not sell any more until we get this sorted out.
Yeah.
Thank you for looking that up.
That actually brings me to the second question I had, and maybe this is addressed later on that I can't see yet. But one of the questions that came up was if we're limited to 50 per acre of green burial, does that preclude us from additional conventional burials in those same sections? Like, can we have green and conventional burials next to each other at a higher density than 50 in total?
Well, what we're saying here is that the density of green burials shall not exceed 50 per acre. We're not saying anything about conventional burials. I would interpret that to mean that conventional burials could continue. What's the sense of the rest of the board?
I would agree.
So would I.
yes.
Yeah, and the DEP guidance doesn't
Yeah.
really say anything about that. They just talk about well set back for a hybrid situation.
Thank you.
Jackie,
Oh, sorry. No, I'm done. I explained the.
Right, but your hand was still up.
that's right.
Okay, so we have here, I have proposed to amend this article as it is now written. I've moved to do that. Oh, and I guess we got a second, so. So I
We're
think,
ready for the vote, I think, on that.
I think so.
All right, so Arlene, on the amended language, that's at the bottom of the screen.
Yes.
Noreen,
Yes.
Lim,
Yes.
Kat,
Yes.
Garrett, yes.
Okay. Shall we move on?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, this is some language that I got from DEP that I thought would be helpful for us here. In the case of individuals known to have been killed by a serious pathogenic disease, including highly infectious bacterial and viral diseases and diseases transmitted by prions, green burial, we can put natural green burial, must be approved by the Board of Health.
Can I suggest, rather than use the word killed, I would say to have died as a result of?
Is that
Killed.
just for,
I think killed is not conventional language, maybe.
I got it direct from DEP, so I just wrote what they did. But
all
we
right.
don't have to have it if you'd rather have known to have died as a result of. Or maybe
DEP uses terrible language, and as a citizen and resident, I say thank you, Wim.
I would second Wim's proposal.
Okay, so we're gonna want it to look like
To
known
have
to have
died.
died. Hang on. Whoops.
Great.
And let's do this.
Yep.
Okay. So here's a new thing.
This supposes that we are going to be privy to a death certificate, and we'll have to review a death certificate of everybody who's buried there.
No, I don't think it does presuppose that. It presupposes that if they have a burial of such an individual, that they would apply to the Board of Health for permission to go ahead with green burial, or and we could either grant it or we could mandate conventional burial.
How would we know, though?
Right.
They would apply to us.
For every burial?
No,
They would have
only
to have-
presumably, no, they would know. They would have to know if there was a serious pathogenic disease. And they
what
would
if they
apply to
don't?
us. Well,
What if
it said,
what
it
if-
says,
But
it
what
says
if,
known to have died.
all right, and the family may choose not to divulge the cause of their loved
Yeah,
one's death.
because I mean, let's just take as for instance, back in the 80s, when there was tremendous stigma attached to AIDS death.
Right,
Mhm.
people didn't want it
People
on
did
the
not
death
want,
certificate.
they did not want people to know that their loved ones died of AIDS. So people were buried and no cause of death was given.
And that is, as I understand it, I don't know the law here, but as I understand it, it is up to the family whether the cause of death is disclosed to anyone. And I would further ask the question of, what are we going to do with this when we get an application and a burial is wanted within the next 3 days? And we are handed an application, how are we to adjudicate something like this? What do we,
Well,
even if we do have the cause of death on there, what are we doing? How are we making a decision as a board that meets only every other week?
well, I mean, we can always have an emergency meeting, or we can designate someone. I mean, I think there's ways to deal with that part of it. But is there, I mean, this is stuff that I got from DEP. They think it's a doable thing. Maybe it's not. Is there another way that we could approach this? Maybe we should hear from Karen.
Well,
Yeah.
I was gonna ask that piece about the timing, because so we're not an Orthodox community, but is traditional in Jewish burial that it's within 24 hours of the death. It's immediate, partly because we don't preserve bodies. So what would the mechanism be to ensure, if a family wanted to adhere to that? Each family has their own level of observance of the traditions and the laws, the Jewish laws. And I guess my other question, and this I don't know the answer, but if someone's in a hospital with something contagious on a state, federal level, do they release bodies that are dying of contagious, like highly transmissible contagious things? I'm under the impression that there's some, I mean, I guess someone could die at home, but like if Ebola comes or something, like that, like that's what you're talking about. Like, I don't think they generally release those bodies for regular burial if they know that that's what's going on.
What do they do with them?
I don't know. That was my question, but I wonder if there's already a mechanism built in to protect against something highly transmissible. If it's
anybody know of such a thing? Arlene or Wim?
No, I don't.
I feel very uncomfortable being in the decision-making process on this last clause, this latest clause.
Is there
think-
some other way we could approach this?
I was just about to say,
Sorry.
I'm just going to throw out there that either we're okay with green burials or we're not, if they meet the setbacks. But that, I don't know that we are, or any future board, because this particular makeup of the board is not a permanent situation. And so any future board may not be capable of differentiating what pathologies are okay in a green burial and what ones are not.
Yeah,
and I don't think it should be in the hands of a small volunteer board of health. In that regard.
I agree. I think we should not be the arbiters of who should be suitable for burial, because especially since, as I brought up before, I don't think our real concern is biological byproducts of decay. I think that it is inorganic permanent contaminants like radiation, heavy metals. I think that's, if there were a risk, that's the risk, not infectious diseases.
Yeah, these viruses and bacteria are not going to survive the soil. We've already spent time discussing that, about how it doesn't travel.
Okay, well, I'll make a motion that we strike this sentence.
I would agree with that.
All right. So
Does that mean you're seconding it? Yeah, sorry.
Oh,
Yeah,
sorry.
so
Yes, I'm seconding.
I'll take it as a second. Yep. So we've got a motion and a second to strike this particular clause. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Arlene, to strike the clause?
Yes.
Noreen?
Yes.
Wim?
Yes.
Pat?
Yes.
Garrett, yes.
Okay.
All right. Kat, do you have an additional clause?
I do. Okay, The owner of the property, the Jewish community of Amherst, shall determine the slope of the eastern side of the premises. No burial may take place in any area where the slope exceeds 3:1 unless and until stabilization methods approved by the Board of Health have been implemented. Okay, and this is covering the question of slope, because if the slope is too great, and we found this mentioned in DEP and also in the white paper, that there's a risk that erosion will uncover the body. Now, I have no idea if the slope exceeds 3:1. I made a site visit today, but I have no idea what 3:1 looks like. I Googled it and the results were truly frightening. But I would think that it would be up to JCA to make sure that all the area they want to use for burial is appropriate for a burial. So that's why I put this.
So is this the clause that you referred to as addressing the survey? Because I don't think we got back to the survey yet, did we?
No, I can't remember what I said we were going to come back to. But, the thing is about the survey, we've been thinking all this time that we need to have the results of the survey so we can make those decisions. But I think we were wrong. We need to decide what the setbacks are going to be. And then when they have the survey, they will have to comply with our requirements.
Which
right? We don't have to know what they are specifically, what the actual boundary lines are, only that they are in compliance.
Well, unless there are already violations.
Well, that we will get back to.
Okay.
So if you'll hang on to that for a minute.
A survey can tell you elevations and slopes, by the way.
Great. Okay, so I just wanted to make it clear that this is part of the survey that we need. Or that they need, really, because they need.
Yeah.
That is needed. Let's put it that way.
Okay, so go ahead.
One more question. Where does the 3:1 come from, Kat? Just what's the citation for that?
I think that one is from DEP, but it might be from that. It might be from the white paper. They both mention the importance of slope.
Okay, I'm just double checking that it comes from a reliable source that we've reviewed.
Yes, it came from one of those two.
Thank you.
It was really the only sources we have.
Yes.
So it comes from DEP, and it says slope should not exceed 3:1. Variance possible with satisfactory slope stabilization method.
Yeah, I took this straight from them.
Okay, thank you.
Now, again, we better say no green parens natural, right? Because I don't think that this would apply to conventional burial. So I'm gonna move that we amend this same stuff. Okay.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion about that amendment? Okay, so we will vote on the amended language here. So Arlene?
Yes.
Noreen?
Yes.
Wim?
Yes.
Pat?
Yes.
Garrett, yes.
Are we ready to move on, or is there more discussion?
I think we can move on to the next clause.
Okay, and this one I think might be the last one. And yeah, this is the one that Wim has been asking for. These stipulations shall apply only to new interments. So we're not going to ask anybody to disinter their grandmother or something. Any burial that is there, or perhaps we should amend this to have a date like today's date to interments after such an, well,
Yes,
you want to put a date?
yes.
Okay. Do we need to specify green-natural?
Yes, you might as well be consistent.
Okay. So these stipulations shall apply only to new green parens natural interments. What's the right verb here? Performed?
I'm not, I'm not sure.
I'm not either. We need a verb. I feel that definitely that we need.
Taking place,
Sorry?
taking place after.
In place. Sure. I like that better. Okay, so I move that we adopt this final clause in this amended form.
Second.
All right, any discussion on those amendments? Hearing none, we'll vote on the amended clause. Arlene,
Yes.
Noreen,
Yes.
Wim,
Yes,
Kat,
Yes.
Garrett, yes.
Okay, so that's my whole motion. Do you want to look at it from the top?
No, I'd like to make a motion that we adopt the proposal before us as specified.
Second.
All right, any discussion? All right, with the approval of the board, I'll take comment from the public. So Diane?
Thank you. Am I understanding correctly that you're not stipulating any setbacks from conventional burials and wells?
That is correct.
Is there a reason for that?
I would say mainly the reason is that we are deliberating on green burials. I mean, the particular question before us is the green burials, and that we understand them to be within a particular area or two particular areas, so that as I understand it, any conventional burials that are done areas, because the original conventional area is pretty much filled up. I suppose it would be just the same to simply call them burials without defining them. But first of all, because conventional burials are more or less contained. Secondly, because any conventional burial that's within this area will be basically covered by these setbacks. Let's think about that a little bit, Board of Health. Suppose we have an area along one of the borders where green burial is, as we've defined it, as we've limited it here, is not possible. But could there be a conventional burial there? And would we want to constrain or regulate that in any way?
well, what's the rule in the other cemetery?
Well, that's a good question.
Mhm.
Can somebody from the cemetery answer that question?
So I think we
I
have
think
Dina.
Walter's gone. Walter, I believe, is
Or
gone.
what's your question? I didn't understand. What were you asking? Lynn?
They were asking Jackie whether we have a setback limitation for conventional burials at the other town cemeteries, specific.
Or from the conventional side of the Jewish cemetery?
Um,
That's what I was gonna ask was back in 1970, whatever, was there a setback, like the original permitting of the cemetery, whatever process that was that addressed?
I have no idea.
I don't believe there was, I don't believe there was discussion with the cemetery commission about that back then. Because we've talked about it fairly recently. I'm sorry, Walter's not still here. And, you know, the boundaries of the west cemetery, well, of all the old cemeteries in town are pretty well established. And, you know, in the West Cemetery on the east side, there are burials pretty much up to the tree line. I mean, I don't know what to tell you about this, and I don't know where the other abutters are and sort of what the land looks like, but it's an interesting question.
And can I ask a question? In the case of all the cemeteries,
Yeah,
are there more than just the West Cemetery and the JCA Cemetery?
yeah, there's the Pratt Corner Road Cemetery and the Locks Village Cemetery down by the lake that you've never seen before because it hides.
Oh,
And it's about the same size. It might be even a little bigger than the Pratt Corner Road Cemetery. And there are plots available in both of those cemeteries as well.
okay. So is the last, so my question is that in most cases, I think the cemeteries were in before the surrounding abutting properties and well.
Yes. Yeah, maybe not so much on Leverett Road. I'm not so sure, although I'm guessing that that's true. You know, and yeah.
So, right, so the question I think you answered it. The question of what happens with the conventional, like conventional meaning
In a coffin.
in a
In the
coffin
case- in
or
this-
in a coffin with liners with.
Well, the liners, so there's gravity and there's decomposition, which sort of follows gravity and wicks down. So the liners aren't there to prevent the body from decomposing into the soil. The liners are there to prevent cave-in of the grave and to keep things safe. That's what the liner does.
No, I understand. No, that part I understand. That's what I'm asking is, I guess I got lost in all of our discussion about what this original question that we're trying to answer is right now. About what,
Versus green and limitations on siting for conventional burials.
Right, the convention is, are we not?
Brought that up, yeah.
oh, so what I was gonna say is that Diane, you were asking the question, but it applies to more than just the JCA cemetery.
I asked the question of whether this is going to define a setback between a conventional grave and a well for an abutter.
And I wonder if the state regulations already do that. I think that they don't do it for green or natural burial, and that's where the DEP guidance comes into play. But on the DEP webpage for green burial, they list out all of the current state burial requirements, which includes setbacks for waterways and public water supplies. And
But just for green burial.
So what
not
is
for-
that setback?
Well, we don't know because that's really not what we're addressing here.
We're talking about. So the setbacks for green burial and I don't think I'm not sure that there are setbacks I can Google this pretty easily, to see if there are setbacks, for conventional burial, in Massachusetts from private wells for conventional burials in cemeteries. Let's see. So continue to discuss and I'll get back to you in a sec. There's that's going to be in California. Oh, that's stuff on home burials, which is not what this is. Oh, this is going to take a lot of time to sort through, but I can try and get back to you, and I'll try and email Walter. He's out of town, and see if he knows anything about whether there are setbacks in the other cemeteries. There aren't a lot of setback rules about cemeteries in general, which is why I think this has been kind of, you guys have had to go through a lot of dense stuff to figure out how to act responsibly. I have so much respect for this conversation.
So the question for us here is, well, there's two questions, I guess. One is, what exactly would be the difference in this particular case between a green burial and a conventional burial?
What, do you want me to just, I'm not sure what.
In this particular case, given the practices already in place at this cemetery, what would be the specific difference between a green and a conventional burial going forward?
Well, either you're talking about in terms of location, so a conventional burial, so all burial does not use any kind of embalming. And
Right, I'm aware of that. That's why I'm trying to get at what the specific differences are, because they seem to be
the
rather.
only difference is the depth of the body, really.
Okay, that's good to know.
And in our specific cemetery, the conventional burial, the first area that was used for internment, which is the field area.
Yes.
Not the front lawn area by the.
Right, well, we know where it is.
Yeah. That area was required by Billy Clark to use liners because of the sandy soil. So if we were in another place, a conventional burial wouldn't necessarily use liners.
So the point is, Jackie, if there were to be a so-called conventional burial over in the forest area, how would it differ from the green burials in that area? And you said one thing would be the depth at which the body was deposed.
But the reason it would be depth, I mean, then it would.
Are you doing?
That's my understanding as well. It's just the depth.
It can't, and the reason that it's the forest area is that the reason it could be green burial without leveling the forest and making it into an open field, as many cemeteries are, is because the shallower depth allows for planting of bodies in and among the trees.
Okay, so that's the case for the forest area. But there are also plans to have green burial in the front lawn area, as I understand.
Yes.
In the horseshoe, we'll call it. And in that case, so we've got the limit on number of burials per acre. So you're limited to the number of green burials that you can do, right? By this thing. Wait. So, and we've said that in answer to something that Karen said before, they could have also conventional burials side by side, right? And so the question here is, are we putting any kind of regulation on those conventional burials? And if not, why not? Or should we? Board of Health, did I make myself clear on that?
Are there regulations in the other cemeteries in town?
We just had that discussion.
And it sounded like no.
And it was, no, it sounds like I can't, I don't believe so. And I'm not sure. And I'd have to, I'll have to email Walter and I can send you a note, but I can't answer that tonight.
And that question really, Dina, is about density and distance from the border, right?
Right.
Right.
Well, no, it's really just about distance from the property line. It's
Right.
only about distance from the property line.
Because there is no density
We
regulation.
don't have a density regulation.
Okay.
As far as I know. Walter can tell you, how he planned the green burial when they drew out plots in the green burial area and sort of how they work.
But they're pretty much the standard plots.
They're pretty much the standard plots.
I know, because I bought one.
Oh, good. So, yeah.
Kat, would you be okay with me?
They may be a little wider. To
Garrett?
accommodate burials closer,
Right.
Yeah.
Garrett, were you speaking?
Kat, can I share my screen real quickly just to show what DEP says about this?
Oh, great. You found it. Let me stop share on this.
I think I can do it here. So this is
excellent.
What they say about current burial requirements. So there are some, let's see, this says, for example, here where it's talking about, and this is not specific to green burials. This particular one.
Yeah, this is just regulations about.
Right, and the question is,
burials.
But we're talking about property line and wells.
Yes, so I'm just showing you what DEP puts out there as current requirements, burial requirements that include setbacks. And this is not specific to green burial, this section.
If we look at the first paragraph, this might tell us what it says, that unless the property is old, approved before 1908, that land that is situated so that the surface water or ground drainage enters blah, 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 cannot be used for burial purposes unless DEP has given written approval, which means that in 1979, it was determined that this property is appropriate for burial purposes. And that's the burden of Elmer Huntley's letter, in which he says this is like ideal cemetery ground. So that seems to suggest that the conventional burials could take place anywhere in the cemetery where, as long as they meet any kind of property line setback that exists. That's how I read that. Could be wrong.
This is Noreen, and I'm thinking maybe I'm just going to throw a completely different way to think about this.
No,
we've sort of addressed. Well, hopefully it's a helpful one. It sounds to me like several of the abutters are concerned about the integrity of their well water supply, and so and they've talked about testing, which is another way to look at this, is to have their wells regularly tested. And I don't know if the abutters are aware that in the past, the board has had at least once a year where we help citizens get a reduced rate at testing their water and help collect the water and deliver it to the testing service. And that, that might be another way to allay some of their concerns or anxieties about the quality of their well water.
Here's the thing, what would we test for?
Oh, okay. Well, I guess I'm thinking, I'm not a chemist, so I'm thinking, the conventional things that we test for.
Which could
Right, we
become
normally test,
a decomposing animal as much as a human, which is why, unless what we're testing for is, as Wim has pointed out, is heavy metals.
right, and when you get into testing heavy metals, that's an expensive proposition.
Okay.
And where is the actual source? Is it from a couple of decomposing bodies, or is it from other industrial activity or other things going on?
Right, it would not be terribly
Conclusive.
diagnostic. Yeah, it certainly wouldn't be conclusive.
Okay, so much for my alternative idea.
Nice try.
So now we are still thinking about, I feel that it's not our brief to regulate the location of conventional burials. Right here, we are intervening in this because there is a potential public health threat, although small. But that does not seem to be the case with the conventional burials. And I think that we should not try to exceed our brief by regulating
I
any.
totally agree. That was not the issue before us.
So Kat, do you want to bring back up the language that we had and we can proceed with that discussion?
Sorry, hang on. I'm getting punchy.
And for all we know, the cemetery commission may be, in possession of language that addresses conventional burials and distance to borders.
Really, I think that comes from the state.
Mm-hmm.
And I would assume that we're in compliance with any pre-existing regulations about conventional burials. I believe the reason this is an issue is that there were new guidelines that came up fairly recently since we started doing the burials. So, which isn't true for conventional burials. Those guidelines, in theory, haven't changed since then.
I would assume that is so. And yeah.
Me too.
Okay, so our proposed stipulations are now before us again.
I think the only other thing that I can think about related to this is if we need to differentiate between private and public drinking water wells, because if it's public, then DEP has the authority and we don't.
Well,
And they're,
that's true, but we do know that the only public water supply well is more than 100 feet away, so it's kind of moot.
maybe
But we could put that, we could add the word private if you think that makes it better.
I think so.
Okay, so
I would
I move that we add the word private right here before any and drinking.
I would second it. Any discussion about that?
Does it show up again? Do we have to add private elsewhere?
I don't.
I don't think it does.
All right.
What? All right, any other discussion? Hearing none, adding private to the first clause there, Arlene,
Yes.
Noreen,
Yes.
Wim,
Yes.
Pat,
Yes.
Garrett, yes.
Do you want me to read this at you or read it to yourself?
Is there a preference from the board?
Assuming they
I'm
don't
okay.
need it read to them.
I'm okay reading it myself.
Just tell me when I should scroll down.
I'm ready for scrolling.
I'm good on my end.
Mhm. Mhm.
I'll make one last. I'll move one last amendment. I don't know why I put interments there. It seemed like the right thing at the time. Can we just go back to burials? For consistency here.
All right, are we ready to vote on the language before us?
Yes, yes, I move we adopt this proposal as written.
Second.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, we will go ahead and vote. So Arlene,
Yes.
Noreen,
Yes.
Wim,
Yes.
Kat. Let's see, Kat,
Yes, sorry, I spoke, but not loud.
that's okay. Garrett, yes.
Sure.
All right. Do you want to resume the helm, Kat?
Not specially, because I think we're about ready to adjourn. This was grueling. Thank you all for that really hard work.
Thank you
Thank
for
you,
putting
Kat.
this together.
Yeah. you did
Yes.
My pleasure.
the
And
lion's share.
thanks to all the other people who came.
You
I
guys-
also wanted to thank the board for their really thoughtful consideration of this issue.
Pleasure.
I learned a
Thank
lot.
you. Thank you for coming.
Any unanticipated business?
Oh God, I hope not. I'm about dead here.
Good night, everybody.
Good
Good night, Dina. Thank you. Karen, I will send this to you. Do you need it in hard copy or shall I just email
No,
these?
you can just email, that's fine.
Okay, I'll do that for you tomorrow.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Okay. I move we adjourn. I'm ready to go.
It's only
Thank you.
7:45 where I am, so
Yeah.
Yeah.
keep going.
Dinner time for you, bedtime for me.
Thank you.
Right, so move to adjourn.
Yes.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Yes, please.
Yes, please.
Thanks, everyone. Good night.
Okay,
Good
thank you
night.
all. Good night.
Good
We'll be
night.
back in Shutesbury soon.
And I'll
We're looking
good.
forward
Drive
to seeing
safely.
you. Yeah, have a
I-
safe trip.
And I'll be gone for the next 2 meetings. So, sorry.
And so will I.
And you'll be gone too. So yeah, we'll need you, Garrett, for a quorum.
Okay, happy travels.
Safe
Thank
travels.
you.
Bye.
Yeah, safe travels, Garrett.
Night.
Good night.